And somehow Leinster needed to find the same shorthanded spirit shown by the Champions Cup side at the Aviva on Good Friday. And once we won a penalty at halfway, Sam Prendergast was cool, calm, and collected, setting up and slotting the place kick. And maybe here, Joe, we can talk for a bit about his overall performance. He really impressed, of course, in the under-26 nations, although this was a very situation for him, which he also handled well.
Yeah, very much so. I was very, very lucky and glad that you asked me to take a look at him, because I'd seen obviously some of them on the 20s, but I'd never seen anything else about him before. So all the hype that everybody was putting up against, it was great to be able to look at him with a fresh pair of eyes, not understanding. And there's a range of things. He's 20 years of age. You know, he's been in the academy since last year. He obviously was playing for Leinster. He's obviously been, you know, and Kildare before that, been groomed through. I liken them to Sexton in many ways, but without that edginess. He hasn't got that yet, but his calmness, his positioning. And I go back to that very first 2 minutes. If you haven't, go back to the very first 2 minutes of the game, and where everybody will miss it because of Vack's great try. But in the first, he has 3 touches really. And in each of those 3 touches, Sam Prendergast comes in and he creates space. It's almost like this force field around him. I don't know how he's done it. And I had to go back, I said to you before we came on air, I had to go off. I had to go back 3 times and watch it back to see exactly what he'd done. But he just creates it. He has a natural vision. His game management, his positioning is absolutely sublime for a 20-year-old out half. Of course, he was a former scrum half as well, so I think he has that vision and capabilities of knowing what to do. Now, some people might say, okay, well, he wouldn't get that time and measurements against some better teams, you know, especially ones whose line speed is very, very fast. In time, he'll get targeted the same as Sexton, without a shadow of a doubt. When people realise that you give Sam Prendergast any inch and you're not up on him fast and you're not targeting him, rightly or wrongly, then that's just going. But that first 3 minutes was absolutely sublime. When he made mistakes, as we said before, he's a young lad. You know, there was that one where other words are available as the F word, and but he just leant back slightly, and it went off the side of his boot, and he was so angry with himself straight away. But then that was the only bit of emotion I saw him in the whole game. He's just a sublime young player. My worries: how do they manage him at the club, where technically he should be behind the 2 Burns, maybe Frawley, Johnny Sexton, so maybe he's number 5 in the row. Does he go somewhere else? Do they move other people on? How fast do they bring them through? It's great having all the hype, and we've seen it before. Joey Carberry, for example, got a small injury, all of these things, but he's got a long way to go. But the assuredness, the vision, the game management, his persistency, you know, again, very Sexton-esque, where we picked up that Michael Milne try. You know, he picks up the ball and he's within 5 meters. He's just there at the right place at the right time. Now that takes a particular skill set for any player to be able to do. But at 20 years of age, at altitude, and he was blowing hard sometimes in the second half, and yet he found then something else. And it was just, I was really, really impressed. Couple of small mistakes, but you know what? I've seen senior players but worse mistakes than that. Yeah. You know, more experienced. But listen, you could go on forever about him. I think he's definitely one to watch. I have got a feeling that he will overtake certain players at Leinster, and be managed as a player better. He is probably the best thing I have seen at a young age in an out half position, because he's one of those people. He's one of those people for me in the future who has potential to move to full back, a bit like Bowden Barrett, world class 10. He's already got the learnings. He bulked out a little bit from being a scrum half, but you imagine him. When he slows slightly, he could move back like Bowden Barrett does into full back, and the vision of the whole game. I think he has those capabilities for me, where you can sort of manage him more and more and more without making him a utility player per se. But very impressive, Jeff, for a start. Yep. Well deserved player of the match award for me. No shot.
Absolutely. I mean, it reminds me of, I mean, it was a different situation, obviously, but you go back to that famous semi-final in Croke Park in 2009 when Contepomi went off, and it was, one of Leinster's biggest games. Well, it was definitely Leinster's biggest game ever. And he went off early, and young slip of a lad, Johnny Sexton, had to come on and take over those responsibilities. And he did it with such calmness, taking drop goals from the other side of the planet and doing all that stuff that he did on the day. Like, it was that kind of composure, like you said, very first series of plays, just his body language. He was just so confident in setting up the positions and getting the passes exactly where he wanted, knowing where his players were around him, and he brought that right the way through the match. He did make mistakes. There's definitely elements of his game, of course, he's going to work on, but for a debut in South Africa and under the pressure that Leinster was, and to get us back into it, it was just incredible all around. And while we're talking about Sam, we might as well go on to harp about the full crop of prospects coming through the Leinster Academy. Although maybe just for the next few minutes, we can forget all about the talk about demographics, private schools and such, as there's more than enough about that around the place now. And maybe just focus on the players themselves. We brought a few from this year's under-20s Grand Slam team on this tour, like Conor O'Tiernig, Vincent Gunn, and Liam Maloney. But let's not forget that they won a slam last season as well. And we've also players like James Cohan and Charlie Tector, plus more from previous years. It's quite a lot of talent to look forward to, Rich.
Well, yeah, it's clearly a wonderful assembly line. And I listened to an interview with Leo the other day, and he was talking about Jacques Nienaber, and he was talking about he was comparing Stu Lancaster and Jacques Nienaber, and what each, well, one of them has and is now leaving, but what Stu Lancaster has brought. And one of the things he was talking about was about and when he was talking about this, he touched upon the young players he'd taken on his tour, on this tour with him. And he was talking about the preparation that happens all the way through the system, from the schools to the AIL to the clubs and into the academy. And I jest, obviously, given some of the rubbish that's been written and spoken about this past week, but that is down to sheer graft, hard work, appointing the right people at the right time, in the right place, with the right resources. That is what that is down to, and that is about developing a Leinster way. So this isn't about bringing in marquee signings. This is about forging those kids in Leinster. That's who they want to play for. That is what is in their DNA. That style of rugby is in their DNA. That is why it seems seamless when new people slot in to the systems, because the systems are there. But it's the mentality, and you see, Joe's just been speaking about Sam Prendergast, but you see it there, that never say die attitude. Most other teams, being down as they were the other day, would have just, their heads would have gone down. Altitude, what the hell? We're not playing for anything really, because at the end of the day, we're qualified, and this is pretty much a bit of a tour. No, I am playing for Leinster. I may be the third or fourth or fifth string in the case of Sam Prendergast, but I'm wearing this shirt and I'm defending this shirt and I'm going to win with this shirt. And it's that attitude, and that attitude, I am sure, starts in schools. All these kids that you've mentioned, we've watched them in the under-20s. I absolutely love watching the under-20s. Because you see all this raw talent coming through, all these, the Sam Prendergast, the Tectors, the Cohans, they're just an absolute joy to watch, a real joy to watch, before they actually explode onto the scene. And not all of them will, but that's, it is what it is. But most of those you've mentioned will, you can see it. They're gonna wear the green at some stage. Easily. So I think that is a testament to the systems that we have in place at Leinster. And these are the byproduct of all that hard graft, all the excellent work that is being done in the lower echelons of Leinster rugby as a province. This is where the cream of the crop ends up, and they end up wearing the blue, and they end up getting their caps, as Sam Prendergast got yesterday. But that is what it is. It is this assembly line, if you will, of I've used this term before. That they are actually forged there, and I use that because I like the they are created there. Their DNA is created there. So I can't speak highly enough, to be honest. I may be biased, but it is a system that should be emulated elsewhere. That is, and I don't want to sound arrogant at all. The Gary Ringroses of this world don't just happen. They are created. The Johnny Sextons of this world don't just happen. They are created. And the creation comes from when they were kids and they were playing under 20s and under 23s and everything else, and in schools and for their clubs, etc. That's where it happens. They don't just suddenly appear on the market. They're not picked out. You're not going to be like Man City and you're going to buy the most expensive player on the planet. No, because those very expensive players on the planet, very skillful players on the planet, are coming through your own academy. Yeah. That's where the investment has been.
Absolutely. And I mean, it's like if you compare it to the Test rugby and you saw the success of the All Blacks over the years, and you had two kind of camps of people talking about the All Blacks as like, oh, they're this, they're that, and the other, they're getting advantages to the refs and all this, and people complaining. But then you got the people, well, listen, if they're setting the standard in the sport, why don't you try to raise yourself to that standard? And that's the whole idea. It's the whole rising tide thing. And that's what Leinster are doing with it, with their academy. I mean, I don't think anything speaks to that more. We've been talking about Sam Prendergast and how he had a great Six Nations, how he compares to Johnny Sexton. There's a young lad called Charlie Tector, who kind of did exactly the same thing the year before. He did a pressure kick to beat France to win a Grand Slam, same as Johnny Sexton did. Yep. And he's coming through as well. And hopefully he'll get a good game time against the Bulls next weekend, because he's on the tour as well. And he's another guy as well. So there's at multiple positions, there's a lot of teams coming through. I mean, what's your take on the whole academy situation, Joe?
Oh, I think it's very good. I've been watching with interest this week after the Leicester game. Everybody from Richard Wigglesworth through to the world yet again saying how favoured we are and how this we are, and yet the ignorance of a whole pile of people about the fact that, as Richard's right, the DNA is created in the schools. And yet, do you know what? Genuinely, if I was living in Munster, if I was living in Connacht, or I was living in Ulster, then I'd be saying exactly the same thing. I mean, Jesus. Me and Rich on D4 mob, we have to get a visa to get inside the Pale, let alone inside D4. That's why we can only go sort of twice a year. But in all seriousness, if I was a Munster fan or whatever, I'd be like, well, look, that's the nature of the game. Down where we are, or over west, there's a different mindset. We don't have the schools. And so from an Irish rugby perspective, and you've always got to look back at the green, that's a great thing. The academy rolls through. My only concern is that we don't have a fifth academy somewhere where you can take aspiring players. And I know it has happened, but I'd like to see more of it, where, because we've got the majority of the schools there within Dublin, the 6 top schools really, those players can't go everywhere. And we've talked about the fact that now you've got Tector, you've got Sam Prendergast, you've still got Sexton there, you've got the 2 Bens, you've got Frawley. Jesus, like, lads, they're never going to all get to play. So what happens to them? What about the ones who are at just a slight tier below them, who are still good enough? Why aren't we then farming them in to supplement the other academies? And then if they want to come back, they can do. Because at the end of the day, it's a business for these young lads, and they want to play for Leinster. But if they're, and the way it works, they can be a fraction off, they can be so many pounds, they can have a bad game, the coach it's fine margins in the game. So why aren't we using our academy to farm out to other academies? Other fans may say, well, look, we don't want your cast-offs. Well, don't be complaining then. Form your own academies, make the best of what you've got, blah, 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 blah. But there needs to be one final thing, Mick Dawson, the outgoing CEO, what a guy behind the scenes who I think has managed all this, and notwithstanding, I'm not an anti-David Musafira person, like some far, I think what he's done for Irish rugby isn't great, but Mick Dawson, there's a downside to living on the doorstep of the mothership, as you would call it. There is a downside, and that downside is you might get a little bit more notice in, a little bit more help, but you get more people poking the finger, telling you what you should do, because there is a bit of a thing. So Mick Dawson, well done, because he has helped create and move the beast that is Leinster Rugby as an organisation way on, and I hope that he will be granted every congratulations for that in due course.
Absolutely. I mean, because of course it's not just the rugby that these academies are doing. I mean, they're doing business degrees, and they're doing college just in case there's an injury or something that ends in a career. It's a whole system that's set up to prepare them not just for rugby but for life after rugby. And we've seen a lot of players been able to take advantage of that when they have had to retire. So there's a whole lot going on there in that system, and we just see the players coming through, and there's more coming through again every year. And like you say, they're eventually they're going to have to find somewhere for all of them to go, because there's just too many. But it's still a system that's the envy of and it's known now all around the world. And you can see why now it's not just a case of we're getting new coaches in, not just because it used to be a time when a coach would come into the provincial system, not so much for the province, but also because they thought it might be a pathway to the test job or the national team. But not that anymore. People are coming to Leinster because they want to coach at Leinster, and they know what systems are in place there. So that's great to see.